My God, Miranda, did you seriously come to your own husband's funeral in that cheap dress? The voice of my daughter-in-law, Sloane, sliced through the sanctified silence of the chapel, sharp and cruel as broken glass. It wasn't a whisper. It was a declaration designed to humiliate. All eyes, previously soft with shared grief, snapped to me. I felt them like physical touches, 100 tiny judgments landing on the simple, elegant black dress I had chosen to say goodbye to my husband. To her, it was a pauper. What she couldn't possibly comprehend was that this cheap garment had cost more than her car. "Sloane, please, not here," my son Michael murmured, his voice strained, a familiar note of helplessness in the face of his wife's venom. But she was already performing for her audience, 2 friends who nodded in sycophantic agreement. "No, Michael. Someone has to say it. I work in high fashion. I know quality. And this," she said, gesturing towards me with unconcealed disdain, "is a clearance rack special. Your mother has 0 class." The murmur that rippled through the pews was a wave of second-hand embarrassment, but not for me, for them, for having to witness this. I kept my hands clasped tightly in my lap, my head bowed slightly, feigning a wound I did not feel. The pain was there, a vast, hollowed-out cavern inside me, but it was for my lost Martin, not for her petty words. Yet, I let her see what she wanted to see, a defeated, tasteless old woman. "Poor Martin," Sloane continued, her voice dripping with a theatrical sorrow that turned my stomach. "He must be turning in his casket, seeing his widow didn't even have the respect to dress properly for his final farewell. It's humiliating for the entire family." Tears welled in my eyes, hot and sudden, but they were not tears of shame. They were tears of a pure, incandescent rage that had been simmering for years, finally brought to a boil on this, the worst day of my life. This woman, this stranger my son had married, dared to desecrate this moment, to make it about her own shallow sense of superiority. And she did it all while standing there, utterly oblivious to the truth, that she was a mere sales associate in one of my boutiques, and I was the anonymous owner whose name she probably whispered with reverence. "Just look at her," she pressed on, emboldened by the silence. "She can't even afford decent black. Michael, you really must start giving your mother an allowance, for all our sakes." A bitter smile threatened to break through my carefully constructed mask of vulnerability. If only she knew. If only she could see the walk-in closet in my penthouse, a sanctuary holding over 200 designer pieces. If she could comprehend the number of zeros in my bank account, a sum so vast it was abstract. The pink slip with her name on it, waiting in my locked desk drawer, felt heavy with promise. My daughter, Maya, reached over and gently squeezed my arm. "Mom, ignore her. She's being monstrous." But I didn't want to ignore her. I needed to hear every poisonous word. I needed her to dig the hole so deep she could never climb out. "It's all right, Maya," I whispered, my voice deliberately soft, fractured. She's not entirely wrong." Sloane's face lit up with triumph. "You see? At least she admits it. Look, Miranda, it's not your fault you were born without good taste, but you could at least try not to embarrass us all in public." Her friends, Candace and Naomi, murmured their agreement, a Greek chorus of mean girls who never grew up. "Oh, the poor dear," Naomi cooed with false sympathy. "It must be so hard not having the resources to present oneself properly." "Precisely," Sloane agreed. "Imagine showing up to your own husband's funeral dressed like you're off to a yard sale. She just has no common sense." The whispers around us intensified, and I caught fragments of pity and judgment. What a shame. So embarrassing for the family. Perfect. Every witness was another stone on the path to the reckoning I would bring. "And those shoes," Sloane continued, her gaze dropping to my classic black pumps. "They look like they came from a thrift store bin. My God, if I were her, I'd be ashamed to be seen." Those pumps, a custom-made pair from a cobbler in Italy who served only a handful of clients worldwide, had cost $12,000. The irony was so rich, it was almost palatable. "Look, Miranda," she said, leaning in with a condescending tilt of her head, "I know things are tight for you now that Martin is gone, but next time you have a function, I can lend you something from my own wardrobe. I have connections at the finest stores." The offer hung in the air, so ludicrous it was almost beautiful. This woman, whose paycheck I signed, whose employee discount she used to buy the very clothes she now flaunted, was offering me her charity. It was a scene from a twisted comedy. "That's very kind of you, Sloane," I replied, letting my voice tremble, "but I wouldn't want to be a burden." "It's no burden. It's basic decency," she stated, a sanctimonious smile plastered on her face. "It's what any person with class would do." The discreet applause from her sycophants was the final nail. She had successfully turned my husband's funeral into her personal stage, a platform from which to preach about a class she herself would never truly possess. "Poor Martin," she sighed again, a masterful performance of grief. "He was always so worried about you. He used to say he didn't know how you'd manage without him." A fresh, genuine pang of grief shot through me. Martin had worried about me, but not for the reasons she imagined. He knew my heart, my tendency to forgive, to turn the other cheek. In the quiet of our bedroom, just weeks before the cancer finally took him, he had held my hand and said, "My darling Serafina, when I'm gone, you must promise me you won't let the world walk all over you. You have a strength you keep hidden. Show it to them." That day had now arrived. The performance was over. After the final hollow condolences were offered, I drove away from the funeral home in my 2015 Honda Civic, a deliberate part of my carefully constructed facade. The world saw a struggling widow in a humble car, returning to a modest apartment. They didn't see the Bentley and the Porsche tucked away in my private garage. They didn't see the penthouse with its view of the city's skyline. Tonight, I needed the anonymity of the Civic. I needed to be the Miranda they all pitied. Once inside my seemingly ordinary apartment, I double-locked the door, slipped off the $12,000 pumps, and poured myself a glass of wine. Not the boxed wine Sloane assumed I drank, but a Bordeaux so rare and exquisite, its bouquet alone could have paid her rent for a month. I carried the glass past the unassuming furniture to a bookshelf filled with cheap paperback novels. With a soft click, a hidden mechanism released, and the shelf swung inward, revealing my true sanctuary. This was my world. The air smelled of old leather, fine paper, and quiet power. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the glittering city, but the glass was tinted, a one-way view into my kingdom. On a vast mahogany desk lay the blueprints of my empire, the deeds to 17 luxury boutiques, the financials for 3 textile factories, personnel files for hundreds of employees, and there, nestled in a separate folder, was the file for Sloane Albright. I opened it. Sales Associate Level 2. Base salary, $3,000 a month. There were 3 formal warnings for tardiness, 2 customer complaints about her dismissive and condescending attitude, and a note from her supervisor about an unwarranted air of superiority that alienates clients. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. It was all there. She had been building her own professional coffin for years, and today she had handed me the hammer and nails. I picked up my private line, a phone reserved for business that could shatter lives and build fortunes. My HR director, Janice, answered on the second ring. "Miss Sharp, I'm so deeply sorry for your loss. Martin was a wonderful man." "Thank you, Janice," I said, my voice now stripped of its earlier fragility, replaced by the cool, calm tone of a CEO. "I need you to handle a matter for me, a personal one." "Of course. Anything." "I want a complete and meticulous audit of Sloane Albright's performance at the flagship store. every interaction, every complaint, every minute of unaccounted for time. There was a brief, understanding silence on the other end. Janice had been with me for 15 years. She knew what that tone meant. Is there a specific focus? Let's just say she has demonstrated a profound lack of respect for clientele, a trait I will not tolerate in my company. Document everything. Understood. I'll prepare the documentation for disciplinary action. Prepare everything, Janice. But we will wait for the perfect moment to strike. I hung up and sat in the embrace of my Italian leather chair, the weight of the day finally settling upon me. The public humiliation was merely the opening act. Sloane had no idea she had just declared war on a woman who had spent 50 years building an empire from nothing. My Martin had always been my shield. Now I would have to be my own sword, and I would wield it with the precision and grace that only a woman who had spent a lifetime in the shadows of high society could command. The lesson was about to begin, and it would be one she would never, ever forget. The week after the funeral unfolded with a predictable, grinding hypocrisy. Sloane, emboldened by what she saw as her triumphant performance, made sure to remind everyone of her magnanimity. She posted vague, sanctimonious messages on social media about the importance of family support during difficult times and helping those less fortunate develop taste. Each word was a fresh insult, a tiny paper cut I allowed to bleed, knowing the final wound would be mortal. On Wednesday morning, my son Michael called. His voice was strained, laced with a pity that felt more offensive than Sloane's outright contempt. "Mom? Hey, Sloane told me about her offer to help you with your, wardrobe situation." I closed my eyes, leaning against my kitchen counter. The same counter where I'd shared coffee and the morning paper with Martin for 30 years. "Yes, she was very generous," I murmured, layering my voice with a fragile gratitude. "Look, Mom," he continued, and I could hear him choosing his words carefully as if I were a simple child. "I know Dad handled all the money. Things must be tight for you now. If you need anything..." The irony was so profound it stole my breath for a second. My own son offering me financial help from the modest salary he earned as an architect, a salary that was a rounding error in my weekly investment returns. The son whose college education was paid for with the profits from a single boutique's quarterly sales. "Don't worry about me, Michael. I'll manage fine with your father's pension." I made sure my voice wavered just slightly. "Are you sure?" he pressed, and I could almost hear Sloane's voice in the background feeding him lines. "Because Sloane says your apartment is looking a little dated, and your clothes, well, she's an expert." "Your wife is right," I conceded, the words ash in my mouth. "I don't understand fashion the way she does." I could hear the smug satisfaction settle in his tone. "Well, she really does know the business. She works at one of the most exclusive boutiques in the city. Her bosses think the world of her. If only he knew. The boss she so revered was the same woman she had called classless and basic. The boss who personally signed off on her $3,000 monthly paycheck. She must be very talented," I whispered. "She is. In fact," his voice dropped to a conspiratorial tone, "she's up for a promotion. Her supervisor all but promised her a junior manager position. It's just a matter of time." Now that was new. Fascinating information. Janice had given me no such indication. In fact, the latest report suggested the opposite. Her supervisor, Diane, was considering putting her on probation. Sloane wasn't just cruel, she was a liar, building a house of cards for her husband to admire. I'm happy for her, Michael. Yeah, and you know what? When she gets the promotion and the raise, we'll be in a much better place. We can help you out more, maybe even take you on a proper shopping trip, get you some things that suit the family image a bit better. Every word was a tiny, precise betrayal. He was my boy. The child I had sung to sleep, whose skinned knees I had kissed, And now he saw me as a project, an embarrassment to be managed and upgraded, like an outdated appliance. That's very considerate of you, son. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling not with hurt, but with a cold, focused fury. I immediately called my assistant, Estelle. Estelle, I need you to find out if there is any talk, any rumor at all of a promotion for Sloan Albright. The answer came back within the hour. None, Miss Sharp. According to her direct supervisor, her performance review next week is likely to result in a formal warning, not a promotion. So, the lies were multiplying. This was better than I had hoped. Excellent. Now, Estelle, I need one more thing. I want a complete, discrete financial profile on Michael and Sloan. Income, expenses, debts, loan applications, everything. Estelle, a woman of impeccable discretion who had been with me for 2 decades, asked no questions. I'll have it on your desk by tomorrow. The report that arrived on Thursday afternoon was a masterpiece of revelation. It painted a picture of 2 people living in a beautiful, desperate fantasy. Their apartment rent alone was $3,500 a month, more than Sloan's entire pre-tax salary. They were drowning in over $40,000 of credit card debt, had a car loan for a luxury SUV they couldn't afford, and Sloan had requested a hardship salary advance just last month. But the pièce de résistance, the detail that made my breath catch in my throat, was a mortgage pre-approval application for a $750,000 house. The application listed Sloan's current income and boldly her imminent promotion to junior management with a projected 25% salary increase as key qualifying factors. They were building their dream future on a foundation of her lies. The house, the life, the status they craved, it all hinged on a fantasy I had the power to vaporize with a single phone call. The revenge I had planned was no longer just about personal humiliation. It was about exposing a fundamental fraud at the heart of their marriage. Friday arrived, the day of my planned visit to the boutique. I dressed with deliberate care. Not in the flashy, logo-laden pieces Sloan favored, but in a stark, impeccably tailored black pantsuit from a designer so exclusive he didn't advertise. The fabric was a heavy silk crepe that whispered of money, not shouted it. At my neck, I fastened a simple pearl choker. The pearls so perfectly matched, they could only be Mikimoto. To the untrained eye, I was a dignified, well-dressed older woman. To an expert, I was a statement of quiet, unassailable power. At 10 a.m., I walked through the doors of my flagship boutique. The air smelled of fine leather and tuberose. "Good morning, Miss Sharp." Diane, the store manager, greeted. Me. Her eyes warm with a genuine sympathy she knew better than to voice aloud. "The management team is ready for you upstairs." I took a moment to walk through the sales floor. It was a symphony of controlled elegance. My employees moved with grace, speaking in hushed, knowledgeable tones to clients. And then I saw her. Sloan. She was leaning against the glass jewelry case, her personal phone pressed to her ear, her body language radiating a bored indifference. "I know, right? It's so pathetic," she was saying, a loud, grating laugh cutting through the boutique's serene atmosphere. "My mother-in-law is such a disaster. Michael actually said we should take her shopping when I get promoted. Can you imagine having to teach a 70-year-old woman how not to dress like a homeless person?" A well-dressed older woman waiting at the counter glanced at her with clear annoyance before moving to another sales associate. "Yeah, my boss is amazing. She totally relies on me," Sloan continued, spinning her web of lies. "In fact, the promotion is basically mine. She's announcing it next week. No, seriously, she showed up to the funeral looking like she bought her dress at a thrift store. I was dying of secondhand embarrassment." It was time. I approached her, my steps silent on the plush carpet. "Excuse me," I said, my voice soft. Sloan turned, and for a split second, there was a flicker of recognition, followed by profound irritation. She had never seen me in this context, dressed in clothes that spoke a language she understood but couldn't truly speak herself. "Oh, "Miranda," she said, covering her phone's microphone. "What are you doing here?" The disdain was barely veiled. "I came to do a little shopping," I said, layering my voice with a timid hope. "Michael gave me some money. He said you could help me pick out something appropriate." I watched the calculation in her eyes. The annoyance was swiftly replaced by a predatory glee. The opportunity to publicly school me, to reinforce her superiority in her own domain, was too delicious to pass up. "Oh, that's wonderful. Gotta go," she chirped into the phone. "Duty calls. I have to go rescue my mother-in-law from her own tragic fashion sense." She ended the call and gave me a condescending once-over. "All right, Miranda. First, we need a budget. How much did my generous husband give you? Because just so you know, this isn't the dollar store." "He gave me $500, I lied. She let out a short, sharp laugh. "500? Oh my God. You can't even buy a decent belt here for that. But fine, let's see what we can salvage." She led me not to the beautiful new collections, but to a back corner where last season's clearance items were kept. "Look," she said, holding up a simple gray dress. "This is marked down to $400. It's fine for women your age." The dress was from a line I had discontinued 3 years ago for its mediocre fit. "See the cut? It's very forgiving." "It's lovely," I said, running a hand over the fabric I knew was inferior. "Right? I have a good eye. That's why I'm being promoted. They recognize real talent here." Just then, Diane approached us, a perfectly neutral expression on her face. "Sloan, Miss Sharp is waiting for you in the conference room. It's urgent." Sloan's face paled slightly. "Miss Sharp? My boss is here?" "Yes, she arrived a short while ago. She asked for you specifically." Panic flashed in her eyes, quickly masked by self-importance. "But I'm with a client," she said, gesturing vaguely at me. "I can assist the lady," Diane said smoothly. Sloan turned to me, her irritation returning. "Miranda, I have a critical meeting with my boss. Don't wander. I'll be back to finish this." "Of course, dear," I said sweetly. "Don't keep the important people waiting." I watched her hurry toward the staircase, her heels clicking a nervous staccato on the marble floor. She was walking toward her own execution, completely unaware that the judge and jury was the pathetic woman she had just left standing among the clearance racks. The trap was set. The performance was about to begin, and she had already played her part to perfection. As Sloan disappeared up the stairs, a strange, cold calm settled over me. The hum of the boutique, the soft lighting, the palpable scent of wealth. It was all my creation, my kingdom, and one of my subjects was about to learn the true cost of treason. Diane gave me a subtle, knowing look. "Would you like me to—" she began, but I shook my head. Let her stew for a moment. Let her sit in that empty conference room and wonder where her powerful boss is. Anxiety is a wonderful clarifier. I decided to take a turn through my domain. My employees, with the exception of one, moved with a balletic efficiency, their interactions with clients a masterclass in discreet salesmanship. I approached a younger associate named Chloe, whom I remembered hiring 6 months ago based on her startlingly insightful interview. "Excuse me," I began, adopting the slightly hesitant tone of a curious shopper. "That young woman who was just here, with the curly hair, what's she like to work with?" Chloe's eyes flickered toward the stairs, a brief war between professionalism and truth playing out on her face. "You mean Sloan?" "Well, ma'am, it's not really my place to comment on my colleagues. I understand. She just seemed so confident." A small diplomatic smile touched Chloe's lips. "Let me help you with something instead. Was there a particular piece you were admiring?" Her deflection was impressive. She was loyal, not to a person, but to the store's ethos. She was exactly the kind of employee I built this empire with. "I'm just waiting, thank you. But tell me, what's the environment like here? For the staff?" Chloe glanced around, ensuring we wouldn't be overheard. "Most of my colleagues are wonderful. Truly We're trained that every client deserves the same respect, no matter how they're dressed. That our founder, Miss Sharp, believes true elegance comes from humility, not from looking down on people. My heart swelled with a fierce pride. My values, the very ones Sloane had spat on, were alive and well in this young woman. Your founder sounds like a very wise woman. They say she is. That she started with nothing and built all this, Chloe said, her gaze sweeping the room with genuine reverence. That she never forgets what matters. At that moment, Sloane descended the stairs, her face a mask of confusion and frustration. She hadn't found her boss in the conference room, and her carefully constructed narrative was fraying. She spotted me immediately and strode over, her heels hitting the marble with sharp, annoyed clicks. "Miranda, no one has helped you yet? This is unacceptable," she declared, her voice too loud for the serene space. She shot a dismissive glare at Chloe. "She's new. She doesn't know the collections like I do." Chloe was being very helpful, I said mildly. Sloane waved a hand, brushing the comment aside. "Did you find your boss?" I asked innocently. "No, she must have been called away," Sloane said, her confidence visibly deflating before she forcibly pumped it back up. "But it's fine. She was probably just going to tell me about my promotion. She consults me on all the big decisions." The lies were becoming pathological. "Well, while we wait, perhaps we could continue." "Of course. But first," she said, leaning in as if sharing a state secret, "when I'm manager, I'm implementing some changes here. Big ones." "Oh? Like what?" "A client dress code for starters," she said, her eyes gleaming with misguided ambition. "We can't have just anyone wandering in off the street. This is a luxury establishment, not a carnival. If someone doesn't look the part, I'll politely suggest they shop somewhere more appropriate. It's for the best. Our real clients don't want to rub shoulders with people who don't belong." Every word was another shovel of dirt on her career. "A fascinating philosophy," I murmured. "Exactly. My boss will be so impressed with my initiative. She'll probably give me a raise on the spot." She led me away from Chloe, steering me toward the most exclusive section of the store, a curated space featuring my most exquisite, personally approved designs. "Now, Miranda, these pieces are true haute couture. This one," she said, lifting a champagne-colored gown with hand-stitched embroidery I had supervised for months, "is $15,000. I have one just like it at home. A VIP client gifted it to me for my exceptional service." Another blatant lie. Company policy strictly forbade accepting gifts of that nature. "It's breathtaking," I said, my fingers brushing the delicate fabric. "It is, but it's not for you," she stated, not unkindly, but with a finality that was somehow worse. "We need to find you something more realistic, something that suits your current style." She guided me firmly back to the clearance rack. "This gray dress, for instance. It's $400. It's suitable." "What do you really think of it?" I asked, curious to hear her critique of my own discontinued design. She shrugged. "Honestly, it's nothing special, but for someone with your figure and presence, it's fine. You couldn't carry off the more exclusive pieces." The insult was delivered with such casual certainty it was almost impressive. This was the core of her, the rot I needed to expose. "You know, Tiffany, you're probably right about my lack of style, but I have a question for you. Anything. What if someone dressed simply like me but was actually very wealthy? How should you treat that person?" She laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Miranda, that only happens in movies. Rich people don't pretend to be poor. It's absurd." "But hypothetically?" "Hypothetically," she said, patronizing me with a smile, "if someone came in here dressed like you, they are not wealthy. It's that simple. People with money want you to know they have money. They arrive in designer clothes, expensive cars, like my VIP clients. That's how you know." "Very logical," I said. "That must be why you're so good at your job. You can read people." Exactly. I know exactly who can afford what and how to treat them accordingly. It was then that Estelle, my assistant, entered the boutique. She moved with an authority that immediately drew Sloane's attention. Estelle walked directly to me. "Ma'am," she said, her voice clear and respectful, "they're ready for you in the office now." Sloane looked bewildered. "Excuse me? Who are you?" Estelle turned a cool, professional gaze on her. "I'm Miss Sharp's personal assistant." Sloane's brow furrowed in confusion, her brain struggling to connect the disparate pieces. "And what does my mother-in-law have to do with your boss?" Estelle looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. This was the moment. "Your mother-in-law is my boss," Estelle said, her voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. The color drained from Sloane's face so completely I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. She swayed on her feet, her hand flying out to grip the edge of a clothing rack for support. "What?" she finally stammered, her voice a choked whisper. "What did you say?" "You heard me," Estelle replied, her tone impeccably neutral. "Serafina Sharp is the founder and owner of this company." Sloane spun to face me, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrific understanding. "No, that's impossible. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive that old car, your clothes." Her voice trailed off as her eyes finally truly saw my black pantsuit, the Mikimoto pearls, the quiet, unassailable quality of my attire. "The dress you mocked at my husband's funeral cost $80,000, I said, my voice now stripped of all pretense, cool and flat. "The flea market pumps were a $12,000 custom order." "80,000? She repeated, the numbers seeming to have no meaning for her. "But I've worked for you for 2 years. "Yes, you have. And in those 2 years, I've received numerous reports about your unprofessional behavior, your disdain for clients you deem unworthy." I nodded to Estelle, who opened a leather portfolio. "Shall I read them?" Estelle asked. "Please do," I said, my eyes locked on Sloane's pale, terrified face. "I believe Tiffany needs to hear the official record." "Report from March 15th, Estelle began, her voice clinical. "Client complaint that employee Sloane Albright ignored her for 20 minutes, stating she was clearly in the wrong store." "No, that client was..." "Report from April 22nd, Estelle continued, overriding her. "A 60-year-old client was directed only to sale items without being asked her budget or preferences, and was told certain styles were too young for her." "Report from May 8th. Employee was recorded on security cameras using her personal phone for extended periods, ignoring multiple clients." I can explain," Sloane whispered, but the fight was draining out of her. "What are you going to explain, Sloane?" I asked, taking a step closer. "Are you going to explain why you found it appropriate to humiliate me at my husband's funeral? Or are you going to explain how you just told me, to my face, that you judge a person's value by their appearance?" Tears began to stream down her face, leaving black tracks of mascara. "Ma'am, Miss Sharp, I didn't know. If I had known..." "That is the entire point." My voice cracked through the boutique, sharp and final. Every employee and client within earshot froze. "Your respect is conditional. It depends on a person's bank account. You are only kind to those you think can do something for you." She was sobbing openly now, her shoulders shaking. "Please, I'm sorry. I respect you. I've always respected you." "You respected me 5 minutes ago when you told me I didn't have the figure or presence for quality clothing. That was your genuine opinion of your husband's mother." Her crying intensified, becoming ragged, ugly gasps for air. The other employees had gathered at a respectful distance, their faces a mixture of shock and, I noted with satisfaction, a long suppressed sense of justice. "Estelle, the final report, please," I said. "Report from this morning." Estelle read. Employee Sloan Albright was recorded making disparaging remarks about a family member who was also a client, violating company policy on professionalism and privacy. She was also recorded lying to said client about a non-existent promotion. I let the words hang in the air for a moment before delivering the next blow. And you applied for a mortgage based on that lie. Sloane's head snapped up. How do you know about the loan? I know everything I need to know about the people who work for me, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm, especially when they are family. The financial investigation shows you and my son are over $60,000 in debt, living 300% beyond your means. You've taken unreported salary advances. You are a liar, Sloan, in your professional and your personal life. Ma'am, please, she begged, her hands clasped in front of her as if in prayer. I can explain everything. We needed the money to keep up appearances. To keep up appearances, I repeated slowly, letting the irony sink in. While you mocked others for their lack of them, you are bankrupt in every sense of the word, and you dared to look down on me. Miss Sharp, I'm begging you. I need this job. We have debts, the new house. The house you will not be buying with money from a promotion you invented. I turned to Estelle. The documents? Ready for your signature, ma'am. Sloan looked between us, her eyes wide with terror. What documents? Your termination papers, I said, effective immediately. The word termination seemed to physically strike her. No, you can't. This is personal. It's revenge. This is business, I countered, my voice ice. Mistreatment of clients, misuse of company time, falsification of documents, violation of the code of conduct. This is the consequence, not revenge. But I'm family, she wailed. Family shows loyalty and respect. You showed neither. I took the folder from Estelle. You are fired, Sloan. Clear out your locker and surrender your employee badge. Security will escort you out. She collapsed into the chair she had slumped into earlier, her body going limp with defeat. The performance was over. The audience had seen the star of the show fall, and there would be no encore. Please, she whispered. One last desperate plea. What will I tell Michael? I looked down at her, this woman who had caused so much pain, and I felt not pity, but a profound, weary finality. You will tell him the truth, I said. For the first time in your marriage, you will look my son in the eye and you will tell him who you really are. That is the only charity left for me to give you. As the security guards approached, I turned my back. I did not watch them lead her away. The lesson had been taught. The first act of my new life, a life without Martin, had begun, and I had played my part. The silence she left in her wake was heavier than any sound. It was the quiet after a storm, the air still charged, but the violence past. My employees stood frozen, a gallery of wide-eyed statues. I turned slowly, meeting each of their gazes in turn. My own expression, not one of anger, but of profound, weary resolution. I want you all to understand something, I said, my voice firm but calm, carrying through the hushed boutique. In my stores, we treat every person who walks through that door as if they are the most important person in the world. It doesn't matter if they are in denim or diamonds. It doesn't matter if they buy a $50 scarf or a $50,000 gown. I paused, letting my eyes sweep over them. Do you know why? Chloe, the young associate, her voice soft but steady, answered. Because it's the right thing to do. Exactly, Chloe. Because it's the right thing to do. But also, I added, because you never ever know who is standing in front of you. You don't know their story, their struggle, or their power. Underestimating someone based on their appearance is not just arrogance. It is professional suicide. Let what happened here today be a permanent lesson in that. I turned to Diane, my supervisor. Please begin the process for her replacement. I want a more rigorous interview focused on character and values. And Diane? I gestured to Chloe. I want Chloe promoted to senior associate, effective immediately. Her professionalism today was a testament to the standards we uphold." Chloe's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Miss Sharp. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." I then looked at Estelle. "It's time. Please call Michael and ask him to come to my apartment this afternoon. Tell him it's urgent." The hardest part was yet to come. I had to dismantle my son's life to show him the foundation of his marriage was built on quicksand. A few hours later, I was in my modest living room, the facade I had maintained for decades, feeling thinner than ever. When Michael arrived, his face was a mess of confusion and anger. "Mom, what the hell is going on? Sloan came home sobbing, saying you had her fired. She said you own the boutiques. That's insane, right?" "Sit down, Michael." My voice held a tone I rarely used with him, the voice of a CEO, not a mother. "What I'm about to tell you will change everything." He sank onto the sofa, the same one he'd jumped on as a boy, and I saw the ghost of that child in his bewildered eyes. I walked to the bookshelf, triggered the hidden mechanism, and watched his jaw go slack as it swung open. What is this?" "This, Michael, is who I really am, who your father and I really were." I led him into the sanctum. He moved like a sleepwalker, his fingers trailing over the mahogany desk, his eyes scanning the deeds, the financial statements, the framed photographs of my boutiques around the world. "Mom, we're millionaires." Word was a whisper, laden with disbelief. "We are. We have been for most of your life." He collapsed into the leather chair I had just vacated, the one his father used to sit in. "Why? Why did we live like this?" He gestured wildly back toward the living room. "Why the lies? The struggling widow act? Because I wanted you and your sister to become the people you were meant to be, not the people money could corrupt. I wanted you to understand the value of $1, the dignity of hard work, the importance of respecting everyone, regardless of their tax bracket. I wanted your character to be forged in the real world, not a gilded cage." He stared at me, a maelstrom of emotions in his eyes, awe, betrayal, confusion. And Dad, he knew? He was my partner in everything. This was our shared decision. We were waiting for the right time when you had both proven you could handle the responsibility, when your values were unshakable. "And have we?" he asked, a bitter edge to his voice. "Is that what this is? Some kind of test? And Sloan failed?" "This isn't about Sloan failing a test, Michael. This is about Sloan revealing her true character when she thought there were no consequences." I picked up the folder Estelle had prepared and placed it in his hands. "Your wife has been working for me for 2 years. Read the reports. Documented incidents of her mistreating clients, especially older women, because she deemed them beneath her." He flipped through the pages, his frown deepening. These could be misunderstandings. She's direct, Direct? I interrupted, my calm finally fracturing. "Is that what you call humiliating your mother at your father's funeral? Calling me classless, a pauper? Telling the entire congregation I was an embarrassment to the family?" He paled. "Mom, she told me she was just trying to help you, that you needed guidance. And you believed her?" The question hung in the air, a verdict. "You believed it was acceptable for anyone to speak to your mother that way, but especially on the day we buried your father. You stood by and let her do it." He had no answer. The shame finally broke through his defensiveness, and he looked down at his hands. "And that's not all, Michael." I placed the financial reports on top of the personnel file. "Your wife has been lying to you. There is no promotion." There never was. She applied for a mortgage on a $750 million house, based on that lie. You are over $60,000 in debt because she is obsessed with maintaining an illusion of a life you cannot afford. He scanned the numbers, his face crumbling. My God, the salary advances. I didn't know. You were living a lie she created, Michael. She flaunted a wealth she didn't have while mocking others for their supposed lack of it. Now, You have a decision to make." He looked up, his eyes lost. "What decision?" "The decision about what kind of man you are. Can you stand beside a woman who holds such cruelty in her heart? A woman who would publicly eviscerate your mother on the worst day of her life? Or do you acknowledge that the man I raised knows the difference between right and wrong, and that this is profoundly wrong?" He was silent for a long time, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. "She's my wife," he finally whispered, a feeble defense. "And I am your mother. The woman who carried you, who raised you, who loved you unconditionally. The woman your wife considered beneath her. The choice you make now will define you for the rest of your life." He left that night a broken man, and my heart ached for his pain, even as I knew it was necessary. The following days were a blur of fallout. My daughter, Maya, arrived, furious and hurt by the secrets. It took hours to make her understand, to see that the struggle she remembered was the greatest gift we could have given her. Unlike Michael, her anger quickly turned to a sad understanding. She was a teacher, married to a teacher. Her values were already rooted in soil far from Sloane's shallow world. The call I had been waiting for came a week later. Michael's voice was hollow, stripped bare. "Mom, I asked her for a divorce." The words should have felt like a victory. Instead, they felt like a surgery, a necessary, painful removal of something toxic to save the patient. "I'm so sorry, son." "Don't be," he said, and for the first time I heard a flicker of his old strength. "I'm devastated, but I'm also free. It's like I've been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there." We talked for a long time. He apologized, not just for the funeral, but for his blindness, for allowing himself to be seduced by a fantasy. The scales had fallen from his eyes, and the man I remembered was slowly emerging from the wreckage. In the months that followed, I began the process of unveiling their inheritance, but with conditions. Michael would inherit the operational side of the business, the boutiques and factories, but his condition was non-negotiable. He would start at the bottom as a sales associate for a minimum of 2 years. He needed to learn the business from the ground up, to serve the clients his wife had scorned, to earn the respect of the employees. Maya would inherit the financial and real estate assets, with the condition that a significant portion be used to establish charitable foundations for underprivileged children. It suited her generous heart perfectly. 6 months to the day after Sloane was fired, Michael walked into my executive office. He was in the standard sales associate uniform, but he stood differently. His shoulders were back, his eyes clear and present. "Miss Sharp," he said with a small, genuine smile, "got a minute for a progress report?" "Always. How is life on the sales floor?" "It's the hardest and most humbling thing I've ever done," he admitted, sitting across from me. "But yesterday I helped a woman. She was a widow, dressed simply, and she seemed a little lost." He paused, and I saw the lesson truly taking root. My first instinct, the old one, was to assume she was just browsing, but I pushed it aside. I gave her my full attention, showed her the entire collection, treated her like she was our most valued client. "What did she buy?" I asked. "A $50 silk scarf." "But Mom," the way she smiled at me, she told me it was the first time in years she'd felt seen in a store like that. She wasn't just buying a scarf, she was buying a moment of dignity. He looked at me, his eyes earnest. And I finally understood. I finally understood what you and Dad were trying to teach us all along. In that moment, looking at my son, not the blinded husband, but the man rediscovering his own moral compass, I felt a peace I hadn't known since Martin's death. The revenge was complete, but it had transformed into something far more valuable: redemption. A few weeks later, an unexpected call came. It was Sloane. "Miss Sharp," she began, her voice quiet, stripped of all its former arrogance. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I wanted to thank you. Thank me for teaching me the hardest lesson of my life. That respect isn't a currency you only give to the rich. That elegance, real elegance, has nothing to do with a price tag and everything to do with how you treat people who can do nothing for you. I was silent, absorbing her words. They sounded genuine, forged in the fire of her downfall. I'm glad to hear that, Sloane. I'm working at a department store now. It's different, but I'm trying to be different too. I just wanted you to know that the lesson, it wasn't wasted. I hung up the phone. There was no triumph, only a quiet closure. The pain of the funeral, the public humiliation, the shattered marriage, it had all been a crucible. It had broken Sloane's illusions, shattered Michael's blindness, and in the end, it had reforged my family into something stronger and more honest. That evening, I stood at the window of my private office, the city lights sprawling below me like a field of fallen stars. I thought of Martin, my partner, my love. I did it, my darling. I whispered into the twilight. I finally learned to defend myself, and our children are going to be just fine. The justice I had delivered was not merely vengeance. It was a brutal, necessary education, and that, I knew, was the most honest truth of all.